The infamous free concert at the Altamont Speedway on Saturday, December 6, 1969, was more than just the inspiration for the documentary Gimme Shelter. It was a shocking event that seemed to signal the end of the counterculture movement of the 1960s, with an explosion of chaos, violence, and murder. So, today we're taking a look at how the Altamont Free Concert ended the Summer of Love. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. Feel free to leave a comment and let us know what other historical events or weird things you would like to hear about next time. Okay, did everybody bring a blanket? Because these are lawn seats. If you lived in the 1960s, it was impossible to miss the Rolling Stones. They were a massive band, taking the global music scene by storm. But what they really wanted was to play in California, to remind all their fans that the free love movement was just getting started. Woodstock had just taken place a few months earlier, so the idea of huge outdoor concerts for throngs of enthusiastic hippies was still fresh on everyone's mind. While it seemed like a good idea on the surface, there were problems right from the start. Management couldn't find a venue, probably because no one wanted to host thousands of riled-up Stones fans, even for one day. They were rejected from San Francisco and the Cedar Point Raceway, which ultimately led them to a new location choice, Altamont Speedway. Altamont was a last-minute choice of desperation, but it seemed ideal. It was in the middle of nowhere, it was secluded, and there wasn't anything there to get in the way of a bodacious concert. Thousands of fans showed up to connect with friends and party in the abandoned cars left behind on the Speedway. But no one expected what was headed their way. To say the concert had a great turnout would be an understatement. It wasn't just the Rolling Stones that drew people in. The Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Santana, the Flying Burrito Brothers, and CSNY were all on the bill. And who doesn't have a favorite Flying Burrito Brothers song? Event organizers expected 100,000 people, but they awoke the next morning to 3 times as many eager fans ready to rock. By the time the first band started playing, over 300,000 people filled the Speedway's barren fields, and they were all looking to party. Unfortunately, the concert was a disaster from Jump Street. There was almost no preparation, no parking signs, and no instructions for how to find the main stage. Confused fans just abandoned their vehicles on the side of the road. The overwhelming lack of preparedness was a result of the concert's spontaneous nature. Fans only knew about the show 4 days prior. On top of that, the Rolling Stones didn't inform local authorities, police, or the general public because they wanted an organic performance, whatever that means. In the rush to get the event going, no one paid attention to details like bathrooms, food, water, or seating. Outside of a small wooden stage, lights, and a whole lot of speakers, there wasn't much to the Altamont concert at all. Imagine going to a festival and not being able to get water, sit down, or use a sanitary bathroom. Well, maybe that last one isn't much of a stretch. The fans at Altamont didn't need to imagine any of it, because they experienced it for themselves. 300,000 people and no bathrooms is less a music festival and more like a prophecy. And things got worse when security came along. True to the spontaneous nature of the concert, the organizers hired members of the notorious biker gang, the Hells Angels, to handle security. It basically came down to a handshake agreement that the Angels would sit around and keep rowdy fans from climbing on the stage or messing with equipment in exchange for $500 worth of beer. In 2003, that would be $4,000 worth of beer. Yeah, you'd take that gig. So with a deafening roar of 100 motorcycles, the Hells Angels made a grand entrance at the Speedway. As they appeared over the hill, they moved their bikes through the crowd and headed toward the stage. Ready to take up their duties as security, they headed straight for the stage to drink beer and wine laced with LSD. Before long, used narcotics were strewn across the stage. Sounds like a good show. With the Hells Angels on security detail, things quickly turned ugly. The Angels made billy clubs out of sawed-off pool cues and beat concert-goers almost indiscriminately, sometimes outnumbering their targets 4-1. They were unruly and unimpressed as Santana rocked the stage. As the guitarist played on, the Angels pulled people from the stage and pummeled them. The violence had escalated so much that Mick Jagger was punched in the face by a raving fan when the Rolling Stones arrived at Altamont. As the festival continued, the Angels set their sights on more than just the fans. One Angel smashed Jefferson Airplane guitarist Marty Balin in the face when he tried to defend a crew member from their onslaught and beat him to the ground. Singer Grace Slick tried to calm the crowd, but too many substances had been flowing too freely at that point for anyone to pay attention. When Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young were performing, one angel decided to stab Stephen Stills with a bicycle spoke every time Stills stepped forward to the microphone. Apparently he was in charge of microphone security. But Stills endured the assault and played on with blood soaking his pants. Meanwhile, the Stones were at a hotel, getting pre-show jitters with news of the mayhem. They thought about pulling the plug on the concert, but ultimately decided not to. Poor planning wasn't the only thing that spelled doom for the show. The Grateful Dead were supposed to play right before the Rolling Stones, but they cut their set short and bailed out of concern for their personal safety after witnessing the violence in the increasingly unruly crowd. And since the Stones wanted to wait for darkness to take the stage, that meant the restless and incredibly intoxicated crowd had to deal with 2 hours of music festival with no music. That's worse than being stuck in an elevator. Unless that elevator was at a music festival with no music. Everything came to a head when the Rolling Stones finally took the stage at Altamont. As the Stones burst into their final song, Sympathy for the Devil, a young man named Meredith Hunter tried to jump on stage to join other dancing fans. Both testimony and event footage show a Hell's Angel pushing him back violently. This led the angel, Alan Pissarro, to react and fatally stab Hunter. The moment is captured on film in the documentary Gimme Shelter. However, other witnesses claim Hunter didn't confront the angels and tried to flee through the crowd as Pissarro chased him and stabbed him, allegedly only pulling his gun in a final attempt to survive. After the incident, Hunter lay alone and motionless on the ground. 2 people tried to help him, but had trouble getting through the mass of people. Eventually, they managed to carry him to the Red Cross tent. At least they put one of those up. Although he'd been stabbed multiple times and had severe neck and head injuries, Hunter was still alive. The doctor said he needed immediate surgery and had to be airlifted to a hospital. But the only helicopter that could make the trip was reserved for the Rolling Stones, and that private chopper was not to be lent out for any reason. Consequently, Hunter succumbed to his wounds while waiting for an ambulance to arrive. Jumpin' Jack Flash. That's some trash, trash, trash. Pissarro was later tried for the murder of Meredith Hunter, but he was acquitted on the grounds of self-defense. Hunter's mother, Alta Mae Anderson, filed a $500,000 lawsuit against everyone involved in the incident, from the Hells Angels to the Rolling Stones themselves. But she never heard from the band and eventually settled for $10,000. Sadly, Hunter wasn't the only person who lost their life at the concert. A series of tragic accidents claimed the lives of 3 others. 2 young concert-goers were run over by a car as they slept in their sleeping bags. And another man drowned after he fell into a fast-moving irrigation canal. But it wasn't all tragedy. As Jefferson Airplane rocked to the stage, they learned a woman had given birth. That kid would be in their 50s today, and the Stones are still touring. In the aftermath of the Altamont concert, the Rolling Stones publicly distanced themselves from the Hells Angels' behavior, vowing to never use them for security again. And the infamous biker gang allegedly had the response you would expect from an infamous biker gang. According to an FBI agent, the Angels planned to sneak into Jagger's Long Island property for some sinister vengeance. But Jagger's property could only be accessed by boat, and the Angels were forced to turn back when they nearly sank in a storm. The details of the plot weren't revealed until decades later, but Jagger has never publicly commented on it, probably because of the last time he publicly commented on the Hells Angels. This ugly additional chapter only served to cement the already tarnished legacy of the Altamont concert. In his book, Altamont, the Rolling Stones, the Hells Angels, and the Inside Story of Rock's Darkest Day, author Joel Selvin wrote, "The simple truth is that the Stones were in charge of the concert, with Mick Jagger making the calls behind the scenes. Without question, San Francisco was the center of the rock music universe in 1969, and they were trying to latch on to the allure of the San Francisco music scene. But what happened instead was a bloody riot that Rolling Stone magazine dubbed Rock and Roll's All-Time Worst Day, a day when everything went perfectly wrong." And even though the Grateful Dead cut their set short when hell started breaking loose, they'd go on to write at least 2 songs about what happened at the festival, Mason's Children and New Speedway Boogie. The Dead eventually dropped both songs from their live performances. So what do you think? Was the Altamont Free concert truly the end of an era, or just an unfortunate tragedy? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.